Welcome back to the famous town of Bothaville in the good old Free State, or rather, the famous Nampo Park, nestled between the towns of Bothaville in the Free State and the town of Orkney on the banks of the Vaal River in the Northwest Province. At 8:05 on Saturday morning, a full field comprising of all the various classes of SA cross-country racing lined up to take the starters' orders. Defending champions, Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings were right at the front of the queue for the third time in as many events. It can be both an advantage as well as a disadvantage to be the first car on the road, but it's something that Henk Ladergan has become used to in recent races. The youngster initially held onto his lead, but a hard-charging Chris Visser was breathing down his neck. So what happened to Janelle de Villiers and Jean Moore in the second of the Total Agri Racing SA Highlights? Here's the answer. A flat tyre and bent suspension components as a result meant that de Villiers was in for a long day in the saddle, longer than they planned. And then this happened. For the second time in as many events, opening up the road meant that Ladergan got stuck behind a locked gate, or two, losing valuable seconds, or initially minutes as a result. Thank you very much, is what Chris Visser and Donnie Stassen probably said from behind the wheel of their Total Agri Hilux as they took over the race lead halfway through Loop 1. Both the Ford Castrol cross-country team drivers, Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer, and older brother, Lance, navigated by Alvin Vonk, pounced on the situation and moved into second and third place overall respectively as the field neared the end of Loop 1. We'll get back to how the Class FIA and Class T bakkies of the production class reached the halfway mark in just a minute. But first, let's cast our attention over the battle in the class where the guys and girls don't even have windscreens to keep the wind or dust out of their faces. Lady driver Sandra and husband Jaco Jonk were one of the pre-event favourites at the Total Agri 400 in their Total Agri sponsored Porter. But the dream turned into a nightmare when the Porter hit a ditch flat out in fifth gear and rolled over several times. Although they were unhurt and got going again, the damage eventually forced them to retire. Italians Clint Gibson and Alaric Smith were in action again for the first time since the Dalston race in March earlier this year. Gibson enjoyed the outing and returned to DSP at Nampo Park in the current position of second in Class A, exactly 7 minutes behind the class leaders. Those class leaders were none other than championship leaders Tim Howes and Gary Campbell in their Zarco Magnum. Howes was clearly enjoying himself and had a good time behind the steering wheel of the trustworthy old Zarco, whilst Campbell didn't miss a beat on the notes from the passenger side. Here's Howes with his story so far.
Our car doesn't have the top end, but it's good through the tight stuff, and we've got heavy, strong tyres on so we can hit those rocks and hopefully not be scared of punches.
In Class P of the special vehicle category, Guy Henley and Navi Leonard Kremer failed to finish the qualifying race the day before, thanks to a roll. But the CR2 driver made up for it with a very good time on Loop 1 to put him back into the mix. And if you're looking to find a way into the exciting world of cross-country racing, this is it. The class for so-called side-by-side vehicles, or Class Gs. Youngster Kent Rutherford, with the experienced Gerrit Skitter reading the notes, failed to finish the qualifying race the day before. But the guys in the Red Line Motorsport Can-Am bravely fought their way back up the field and completed the loop in 5th position. They were less than 2 minutes behind class stalwarts Werner and Leon Mostert, whose Can-Am Maverick was once again suffering with technical electrical issues. Peter Walter and Sean de Villiers reached the DSP in a provisional podium position, but they had around 7 minutes between them and the current second-place duo of Christo Rose and Arno Olafia, who climbed the leaderboard from 4th to 2nd in Class G during loop number 1. But no one climbed as high as Hanno Bierman and Peter de Beer. Bierman was one of those unfortunate enough to receive a 5-minute penalty during the qualifying race, but that didn't stop him as he fought his way to the very top of the Class G standings at the halfway marker of the race. Here's the confirmation of the standings at the halfway mark of the first ever Total Agri 400 here at the Nampo Park in the Free State. In the special vehicle category, it's the names of Tim Howes and Gary Campbell who appeared at the top of the Class A standings ahead of Clint Gibson and Alaric Smith. Sandra Young's name did not appear on the leaderboard, but Guy Henley's did as the only runner in Class P. And Class G, or the so-called side-by-sides, it was all about the performance of Hanno Bierman and Peter de Beer. Let's now get back to the furious battle that was raging in the production car category. So it was Chris Visser and Donnie Stassen who looked as if they were going to reach the DSP at Nampo as the race leaders. But they were first reeled in and overtaken by a Castrol Ford Ranger driven very quickly by Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer. And a little late in the loop, the Total Agri Racing SA Hilux of Shamir Variawa and Dennis Murphy also managed to sneak past the Vryburg Farmer. So it was looking like Woolridge Jr. would be the leader at the halfway mark, but there was still an ace up someone's sleeve. That someone? Brian Baragwanath, with the pocket rocket Tay Perry reading the notes from inside the Century CR6. Remember, BB started the day with a 5-minute deficit thanks to the penalty from the day before, but the conditions clearly suited the monstrous CR6. It was a fantastic performance in which he wiped out the 5-minute deficit and took the lead shortly before reaching the halfway mark. Or did he? After reviewing the evidence, the organisers had no choice but to give Ladachan the time back that he lost as a result of the closed gates. It was all happening in Bothaville. What an eventful first half of the race, and this was the result of all the action so far. Fortunately for him, the name of Henk Ladachan returned to the top of the leaderboard with a slight lead of only 49 seconds over the flying Baragwanath. Malcolm Koch was leading the way in Class T, ahead of Gary Berthold and Force Prinsloo. Back in the dusty and windy DSP, it was time to catch up with some of the movers and shakers during the first loop of the Total Agri 400.
Yeah, we pushed hard in the beginning. I think we lost a bit of time at the end, but I think overalls we did good, and we'll just try and push on the second lap.
Chanel de Villiers was happy to make it back to Bothaville with all the drama he experienced so far in the event.
Then I hit a big rock in the grass. It broke the rim on the right rear, it bent the rear suspension. Then it caught fire here in the front with the brakes in the grass. So we had quite a bit of action there to put the fire out.
And what a drive from Gareth Woolridge to climb the leaderboard up into third overall.
It was very nice to see, but we've been pushing hard. When I say hard, I don't feel unsafely hard. I said to Boyd at the end, I don't know where we've made so much time, but I'm just really loving the route. The car feels unbelievable.
And how about the passionate Brian Baragwanath, who skyrocketed from way down the order all the way up to second overall.
I want to win for my family. I've put a lot of strain on them in the last couple of years. I've got 2 kids now, and it's been straining on the family. So this wants to show them that I'm doing this for a reason, and I really want to bring home a win.
And despite an eventful loop, championship leader Henk Ladachan managed to hang on to the overall lead with half the race still to come.
We went through a farmyard with a closed gate. So same as last race, Brett had to jump out, open the gate, then I went through, waited for him to put his seatbelts on, and then got going again. Hopefully we'll get our time back for that.
With that amount of drama and action, it was hard to believe that the race was only halfway and that the crew still had another loop of 170 kilometers to go. The route was identical, which meant that by now the tracks would have been open and clear, and the crews knew exactly where they were going. This also meant, though, that the pace was going to be even hotter and that they were in for one hell of a race. Before we tell you how that all ended, though, let's focus on the crews fighting it out for the Class G honours in their side-by-sides. These little off-road machines are deceivingly fast on rough terrain, but the thick sand here in Bothaville certainly slowed them down just a touch. Near the bottom of the order is certainly not where you'd normally expect to find the defending champions Werner and Leon Mostert, but they had no choice this time around, and neither did Dean Bradbury and Timmy Burtis, who could only manage 5th place after qualifying in pole the day before. Current championship leaders Nico Durant and Rickers Hutting claimed the points that came with 4th and narrowly missed out on a podium finish because they were beaten to the line by a similar car of Christo Rose and Arno Olivier, who took 3rd in class. But the drive of the day belonged to schoolboy Kent Rutherford. The Redline Motorsport Maverick failed to complete the qualifying race, so the youngster had to start at the back of the field. With the help of old Gerard Skitter in the passenger seat, they fought their way up and into 2nd place overall for a career best finish. Sometimes you have to just stay out of trouble to be fast, and that's exactly what Peter Walter and Sean de Villiers did. The pairing had a clean run and were rewarded for their efforts with their first-class victory of the season.
This morning we said whoever's going to have least problems is going to be our first, and that was me.
On to the bigger cars in the special vehicle category, and more specifically the CR2, driven by Guy Henley and Leonard Kremer, who crawled their way up the leaderboard over the course of the weekend to claim honours in the Class Ps. After the demise of Sandra and Jaco Jonk earlier in the day, Class A turned into a two-horse fight between championship hopefuls Tim Howes and Gary Campbell, and winners of round one, Clint Gibson and Alan Smith. Howes had a comfortable lead going into the final loop, but Gibson came out swinging early in loop number 2. The two big specials entertained as they roosted their way through the mealie fields, but when the checkered flag was waved, it was Howes who claimed his second convincing victory on the bounce, doing his championship aspirations no harm in the process. Howes was not unhappy about the weekend's proceedings.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. We have confidence in the car, and even though it's not the newest of cars, it's still, we feel we can go as hard as we can. So that's what's fantastic.
Confirmation of Howes and Campbell taking the Class A victory over Gibson and Smith by around 8.5 minutes, whilst Henley survived to take the race in the Class Ps. Class G was all about Peter Walters' first win of 2020. That was all she cried for the special vehicles. Meanwhile, in the production car category, the usual fight between Toyota and Ford raged on as usual, but now also with a new contender in the form of the CR6. The usual Ford versus Toyota versus Nissan battle in the hotly contested Class T did, for some or other reason, not materialize here in the Free State. Class T points leaders Terence Marsh and Lesego Zulu had a long day in the Red Line Nissan office after losing power steering. They eventually finished 5th in class. Pole setter Gary Berthold hit an obstacle late in loop number 1. The damage was severe and the former winner incurred a 22-minute penalty for starting loop 2 a little later than he should have, forcing him down the order. The Total Exilium Hilux was classified 4th in Class T. Former champions Johan and Werner Horn were hoping to get their championship back on track, but the Malalan Toyota driver was forced to drive across 80 kilometers with no power steering, leaving them with no choice but to simply settle for 3rd place this time. This meant that the Class T winner was clearly going to come from the blue corner. The contenders, Malcolm and Franz Koch in a Neil Woolridge Motorsport Racing Ranger, and Force Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen in an identical car. It was an epic battle, with Prinsloo edging closer and closer towards the end of the race. But when the flag was waved, it was the Kochs from Freiburg who walked away with a very popular victory.
So I must congratulate the guys with the route. It was very, very nice. We enjoyed it thoroughly, and the vehicle was unbelievable.
All that remained now was to determine the order of Class FIA and the overall winners. We were now nearing the business end of things, where the factory Fords and Toyotas were battling it out for overall honours, with the 2nd Century CR6 thrown into the mix as well. Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk would have had high expectations, but this time around, the Italians had to settle for 6th, just a minute or so behind the Hilux of Chanel de Villiers, who survived the big scare on the first loop to record a solid points finish after successfully completing loop number 2. De Villiers got the points for 5th overall and missed out on the points that came with 4th by just a mere 31 seconds. Those points then went to Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer after a very impressive drive in their Ford Castrol Cross Country Team Ranger. Remember, this car is essentially still a Class T car, so Woolridge's performance was remarkable. In the end, he missed out on the podium finish by a mere 8 seconds. It was that close. So who did make it onto the podium, and in what order? Well, as has been the case for the last 20 years or so, Chris Visser was once again on his way to a podium finish. But it wasn't to be, as just 20 kilometers into the final loop, the engine of his Hilux cried no more. This opened the door for Shamir Variawa, and that's all he needed. Variawa drove a superb 2nd loop to climb up the leaderboard and into 3rd overall, his best finish of the season so far in 2020. And it didn't take much to figure out that the winner was now going to be either Henk Ladeghan or Brian Baragwanath. But which one? Ladeghan started the loop with an advantage of just 49 seconds, and what followed was a great example of good, clean cross-country racing. Baragwanath and co-driver Tay Perry were absolutely flying in the powerful and very fast CR6, but so was Ladeghan and Cummings. The Toyota Gazoo driver could see the dust of the CR6 ahead of him and knew that he just had to stay in touch on the road to claim the win. And when the times were added, that's exactly what he did. The champions crossed the line to make it 3 wins from 3 starts in 2020. And here it is, proof of Ladeghan's fine victory over Baragwanath, with Variawa taking the final podium position. And a very popular victory for the Koch pairing in Class T over Prinsloo and the Horn brothers from Malalan. Again, no podium celebrations or champagne spraying, but we did get a chance to speak to the race winner.
Really a lot of fun, and yeah, we got away with a puncher 7Ks from the end. I was just told, Brett, no, we're going to drive it through.
So that's how the dice landed in Bothaville at the Total Agri 400. Join us in Paris on the 24th and 25th of October for not one, but the final 2 rounds of the 2020 SACCS. It's a double header that'll decide all of the titles. This action from the Total Agri 400 was proudly brought to you by the South African Cross Country Series in association with Total Agri Racing, Ford, Total Quartz and Pirelli.